You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Filmmaking Conversations with Damian Swaby. Listen to conversations with award-winning filmmakers, directors from the golden age of television, and creatives from the indie film community who continue to inspire the next generation of filmmakers. And now, over to your host, Damian Swaby.
Today on Filmmaking Conversations, I speak to an outstanding editor. Woody Chapman has proven himself to be a true virtuoso. His work in this field is characterized by seamless transitions, precise cuts, and a knack for highlighting the most impactful moments. He understands that every frame, every second counts, and he uses this knowledge to create videos that are not just visually stunning, but are amazing. His expertise as a video editor has allowed him to further enhance his storytelling capabilities. Whether it's a puppet show, a Disney production, or a video project, Woody Chapman brings the same level of passion, creativity, and attention to detail in everything he does. His work in video editing is another testament to his versatility as an artist and his commitment to creating engaging, memorable content. Let's look into the life and career of Woody Chapman. We'll explore his work behind the scenes in the editing room, where he shapes and refines raw materials of storytelling into polished gems of entertainment. Enough from me. Let's hear from Woody Chapman himself.
So I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, which doesn't have the biggest post scene there is, but I'm working at this company, Brute and Strobe, and they really, pride themselves on being able to work remotely with people. So I would say I spend, 90% of my time with directors and virtual calls. So I'm working with people in London, New York, and LA. So I got to get my time zones down to make sure I'm always on the right calls, because people aren't used to, I just assume people are talking in Eastern time and that. Yeah. I guess it's a time code and not time zone. But I would say St. Louis is a really interesting town, and there's not a huge post scene here. But, there's so much virtual, through Twitter and places that you can connect virtually with people, especially post-pandemic, that I feel like those lines are blurring as how to be able to connect in different places. But of course, there's nothing like being in person with someone and getting to connect with them.
Oh, I understand that. Sometimes it's amazing. Other times, not so much, but I understand what you mean. Yeah.
And it's interesting. There's some people, I did Chapman University for a whole year during the pandemic, and it was remote. And I had great friends that I had worked with on so many different projects for over a year that I had never met. And then you meet them in person, and it's such an interesting experience because you feel like you've shared so much already.
Yeah, sometimes I've spoken to people on Twitter or on Instagram, filmmakers, and been speaking to them for a while. And then you meet in person. And it's like, wow, it's weird. I've been speaking to this person for 5 years, and now it's the first time I've spoke to them. But the whole situation we're in now, where you can be in St. Louis and edit for a company in London, Paris, New York, or wherever, do you think that's something that you enjoy so much that it could ever take you away from being in a quote unquote studio with people editing in that way? And how do you define today's editing compared to when you first started out, when it would have been in a studio?
Yeah. See, that's one thing is as much as I'm working with directors who are out there, I have, 5 to 6 editors at this post house I'm with, and being able to have lunch and talk to them about a problem I'm having face to face. That is, just having that face to face, even if it's not on the same project, is so, once I have that, it's hard to kind of give that up, have that collaboration, have that, hey, can you come in my room and look at this edit real quick? And they give you a couple thoughts. So it's interesting. I feel like as I started, this is my first job I've had that's because of I've worked so virtual that I'm in a studio with multiple people editing. And like I said, once I have it, I kind of don't want to have gone back. Every other editing thing, I guess it's just kind of the time I came up in the industry was always me bringing my laptop to some person's office and setting up a temporary edit suite kind of with my PC or my laptop, and it always feels so temporary. And I've loved having this studio space so much, and I can, creating the environment of posters on my wall and books for directors to come in to read. I know it sounds kind of dumb. I have a lot of toys all around my office, little fidget things, because I feel like there's so many people who just giving them something to play with with their hands while they're watching something, it kind of unlocks something, or it gives some kind of energy they can put into something else and opens up some creativity. So yeah, I don't know. I really do love, I don't need to be with the director. I don't need to be with everybody, but I feel like I need to be surrounded by some creative energy, because it's just contagious,
Definitely. It's definitely contagious. Energy, I would say good or bad energy is contagious.
Definitely. Yeah.
It really is. So you mentioned that you used to go into offices with laptops and maybe one or two other toys, because you'd have your own setup, your own studio set up, depending on the job and where it was. But how and why did you eventually get into the industry?
It's interesting. I feel like everyone has different answers to this. For me, I grew up, and I have none of my family's in editing or in post at all, but my mom is a casting director, and my uncle has directed or assistant directed, and my babysitter growing up worked in costume design. So I, from this time growing up, had the reality of working in the film industry, or just that industry in general, being someone who has a normal job and like doesn't, the idea of you either have to be a celebrity and make it and not make it wasn't in there was a lot of below the line people who just full-time worked these jobs. So it was very much something that was regular for me. And my mom took me to movies like every week growing up. So I would just see movies. And if I'm being honest, there was like no other option. I knew I was going to be doing something, in the industry. And my mom was a casting director, which meant whenever she needed a kid to act in something or an extra, I'd get pulled last minute, and I end up acting a lot. And I really enjoyed acting. But at one point I realized I enjoy editing just as much as acting. Like I enjoy crafting a scene, dealing with characters, and you can do that in acting or editing. And a lot of people want to be actors,
Yeah.
And it's so simple, but the fact that like there's editors of the best shows, the most talented editors, who are on social media with 150 followers, and you can ask them a question about your favorite show and they want to answer it to you. And that's like such a mind. I just love the work. And so whatever thing I felt like I was talented in, that there was an opportunity, and that's how I was going to go after the work, to be able to tell these stories. And a lot of people didn't want to edit when I was in film school, and I liked editing. And so I was like, I'll do this,
So what's great about that is you've had a unique experience and you've come into the industry in a unique way, I would say. How do you think having those experiences from your mum, for example, as a casting director, have influenced and shaped you as an editor?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I really, especially when it comes to narrative editing, I see editing a lot of the times as just like working a scene. I took tons of acting classes growing up because I just loved the craft of it. I loved talking about characters and intentions and beats, and that didn't really ring true. What could we do to tweak this scene to ring true? And so I think that's how I started my love for like filmmaking, was just getting into scene work and stuff like that. And then once I realized I could have 10 takes on my laptop, and I could be like working these moments and kind of, checking that same box of working on a scene through editing. That's where my passion for it came. And I think there's a lot of people who get into editing when they just realize they can kind of put pictures together or something, and then they start to discover further the acting, intention, and scene work side. And I think I kind of came from it from the other element of it. Like I'm a theater kid at heart, if that kind of makes sense. I did a lot of theater growing up, and I also happened to be people would say I'm decent with technology, and so I think the difference, the meeting of those points, using, the ability to figure out new programs by myself and figure out different workflows along with that storytelling, it kind of met at this point. And I also like sitting down and having air conditioning. So I went on set a couple times. I was like, I don't, I can't memorize this many names. Having to know 60 names as a PA, it's a little too stressful.
All makes sense. I understand that much. It can be very stressful. And some people really take offense if you honestly just walk into a room and say, there were 60 people here. I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember everybody's name. It's not a bad thing.
Also the long, if I'm going to work that many hours, I'd like to have air conditioning,
yeah.
16-hour days. Yeah.
You like air conditioning. We know that. You want to keep things cool. That's fine and dandy. We all like air conditioning in that way. Yeah. And at the same time, you're in a process where there are many options out there for us. Maybe not every option we want, not every choice we want. But how do you come to the decision to choose the opportunities you want to work on? Because it sounds like you're very dedicated to the finer details when putting a scene together. And from your work, I can say that you are. How does that work for you? What is a good match?
I feel like, that's something I'm still trying to figure out. What is, I feel like we're all, as you go through the process, there's more things you learn about the kind of people you like to work with. And, you're always going to have to take some jobs to get money and some things that aren't the perfect stuff. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing to me, number one, is working with people who I like working with, who I feel like are a good influence as just a human and as a creative collaborator. That, this may not be the most exciting ad that we have to work on or something if that opportunity comes up, but I love working with this person and I feel juiced by the end of the day. I feel like we talk about films or we talk about this process, and by the end I want to make more. And that's even, a lot of times those people happen to be the most talented people and the hardest working people. But I've come to the point where I just want to, you're spending a lot of time with people. I want to, number one, spend time with people I want to spend time with. And the work, I think, ends up being better because of that. And then number two, I think, if it's a story that makes me jazzed, if it's even if that's not a narrative story, whatever it is, if it's a documentary story, if it's something that I want to tell, that's like, if you can check those two boxes, everything else is great. And I feel like if you have one of those things, you can kind of deal with the other thing. If it's a great story and you have a great relationship with the person, but it's not you're not a perfect fit, you both have a love for the story and you can fit through it. And the other way, if it's a story that there's the things you might want to change, but you both love working together, you're going to have a great experience. So I think those are the things I look for, because I'm not attached to any genre or any specific type of media I really need to work on, as long as it gets me jazzed,
But in those unfortunate moments when you have to kind of do a job because, those bills keep coming through the door.
Yeah.
And you're doing a job with people that you might want to headbutt.
And you have to treat them very nicely,
Yeah. How do you deal with those moments?
Maybe my acting years of experience have helped me. And also, I think there's times, and I think this is more applicable when you get into certain types of advertising editing, that your job becomes just as much about managing personalities of people and making sure people feel heard. Because when you're working on a whole 20-minute, script or something, there's all these moments. But once it gets down to a 30-second or a 15-second ad, and now you have a bunch of ad executives and people from an agency all having different opinions who are all bigwigs, people whose personality want to be heard. Half of the job is making those changes, and half of that is when you're on a Zoom call or an email, laying it out so that everyone's opinions felt heard. And if you weren't able to hit a note, you explain why you weren't able to hit that note. And maybe, a lot of times my go-to is I put the selects in a timeline of what they're asking for and send them the link and go, you can look at what's here. If you want to roll with these things, like you said, we can go with it. But if not, here's the context you need. So I feel like, I just take into account my job becomes not only editing it, but shepherding. I'm the last person help shepherd this through a process, and want to make sure everyone at the end of the process feels good. Because the worst thing is if you put all of this time into something, if you're a creative, and you have a sour taste in your mouth at the end. And I feel like a lot of people are kind of close to that when they get to me. And, when there's certain ads, I'm not making a lot of choices. I'm choosing between which of the 8 takes is the best take. So a lot of it is just really making sure everyone feels good by the end and they want to work with everyone again. So I think I just switch my brain to that part of it where I become a bit of a cheerleader,
Excellent.
And I make that be my job, and then it becomes a bit easier. And then I come home and I hang out with my cat and I chill out and decompress. But in the moment, I know that's my job,
I love it. That's excellent. And what are the jobs you've had that bring the biggest smile on your face? Because I've been on your website and I've seen some of your work. And the one that stood out for me, maybe not so much for you, I don't know, the one of the puppets.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why, but I just, there's so much good stuff on your website, such a range. But that, I just kind of stopped and I was watching and I was like, this puppet is going through one hell of a hard time.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely identified. I am a huge Jim Henson fan. Part of it, I think, is I grew up till I was about 6 in London, and my parents are both American. And I think my dad, they knew they were going to take me back to America, and they wanted me to still have an American experience growing up. And my dad loved The Muppet Show, so he bought all the VHSs of The Muppet Show. And I grew up thinking everyone my age watched The Muppet Show. And I'd make references, and everyone was like, we're watching SpongeBob, dude. I don't know what you're, And I just had such a love for Jim Henson, and I've read so many of his biographies. And so growing up, I liked the Muppets. And I also think part of it is I loved making movies, and I had a bunch of great friends, but I took movie making more seriously than other people. And I felt bad being like, can you be here for 10 minutes or, 6 hours while we're filming this? Puppets don't complain about how long it takes for them to be on set. So like 10-year-old me could set up these puppets, do multiple things, and then I'd get all the footage together and I could edit it however I wanted, So I think it was a combo of loving the Muppets growing up. I made Muppets, like little Muppets, all the time growing up. I still kind of make them as an adult in my free time. And knowing that I could play all these different characters, and if my friend couldn't make it, I could replace them with someone else who could still hold the puppet. Yeah. And then also doing ADR with puppets is a lot easier than with humans because it's just a mouth open and you can change lines. You know what I mean? Yeah. As long as it's the same amount of consonants. So I think it was a combo of all those things. And I've just been a Muppet fan most of my life.
And a Fraggle Rock fan, am I right by saying?
Oh yeah, Fraggle Rock. Yeah. And also, so I went to London because I'm moving back there, and I went there just to re-see. I hadn't been since the pandemic, so I went a month ago, and I love having those blue plaques because I was able to go to Jim Henson's house because he stayed in London while he was making the Muppet Show, which I feel like a lot of people don't know that the Muppet Show was all filmed in London. Yeah.
Why do you think that choice was made? Sorry, I've
read his biography, so I can have some knowledge. Which is he had an idea for this show, and they couldn't get any U.S. production companies to fund this idea. And I think it was a combo of producers in England who believed in Jim Henson, and there was more. There was people who was willing to buy the Muppet Show in England. So they just went there and did it and figured we could sell it to an American audience after they make it. So
excellent.
And Jim Henson, and multiple times, said he loved working in London. He thought the talent there was better, which is what I kind of think. But that's my
Okay.
my opinion. But
I can't disagree with him. That would be
yeah,
no.
just a little patriotic.
I'm neutral. I'm neutral. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not. No. But that's great. You love Muppets, and you're able to do that. And being a Londoner, somewhat yourself, I can see the appeal and everything like that. So you would agree with me that that's one of your stronger pieces, the series about Muppets, or would you say something else stands out for you that brings a smile to your face?
Yeah, the original question. I mean, this is a tiny bit of a tangent that will relate, but I've been reading this Rick Rubin book.
He's quality.
Which is really great. And it's kind of talking about finding out who you are as an artist. And I feel like that film is probably the closest to who I am. It's a love and a passion I have, the Muppets. And it was kind of the message of the film is something which I think is, look, it's been a while now, but it's kind of having to do with, are you going after art, or are you going after fame, kind of. And it was a topic I wanted to tell with this medium that I kind of knew. So I think it's the thing that's closest to me, and the tone of it is closest. So it was the most fun. Yeah, that's definitely one of the most fun things I got to work on. It gave me an excuse to make puppets. I was like, all right, now I have a month and no one can interrupt me while I'm making this puppet. And yeah, that was probably the most unique vision I had. I also directed that one. Since then, I've been mostly, an editor working with other people, which is a different approach, but just as rewarding in some ways.
And as an editor who's done so much work, so much quality work, and you're experiencing so many different ways, we're going through a change in time in technology right now for editors. How do you think AI will benefit or change the process for you? Because, how should I say this? Well, yeah, there's people I've worked with who seem to be very interested in AI replacing editors. I mean, how is that going to work in your opinion, or overall, what's your overall opinion on it?
I mean, I think it really depends on what kind of editing we're talking about, because I can see some things like, I don't know, if you're watching a football match and it's cutting to halftime or something like that, and there's a little highlight reel of the best plays. I think there's a space where AI could clip all of the goals or the touchdowns and put them together really quickly. But I think when it comes to storytelling and other, even ads or something like that, I think AI can be a help. But in my opinion, I don't think there's any way AI is going to be able to replace editors, because there's just too many. And AI will not be able to take into account a director versus a studio versus a producer, and them all having 4 different notes. And how are you going to deal with what is the priority of that? How do you make them all feel heard? How do you make people feel comfortable in a room? Those are parts of the editing process that I feel like are just as important as any other part. And I don't see how AI will be able to do that. So I think where AI will come in, it will be maybe if you had 4 assist editors before, maybe now you have 2 or 3, and they have these AI tools that just help them sync stuff more efficiently, help them get things more efficiently, put string outs. There's no reason why AI wouldn't be able to see a slate and automatically read the slate's information, find the audio clip, and do it for you. So I think there's these ends dealing with human. There's such a human element when it comes to editing. You're the last human putting this stuff together. And there's moments and feelings. And like I said, working with other people, it'll never be able to replace. It'll just make our jobs easier and more efficient. I already use AI for, we do lots of stuff where people shoot something in 16:9, and then you need a 9:16 deliverable, and they didn't shoot the top and the bottom. Yeah. And if there's nothing going on there, I feed it into the Photoshop and I get some frames and I track that to the top and bottom. And that's how, that's something that would be so time intensive. Before I wouldn't even think to do it. And now it's really simple. So I think they're just tools that are going to help us, hopefully. And people who think they can do more, I think they already treat editors probably like they're robots. You know what I mean? If you treat an editor like a robot, then you think that a robot could replace us.
So in that case, you've spoken about the human element and making everyone feel available and heard in a room.
Yeah.
Do you think that's not just exclusive to the editing process, because there's AI script generators now? What is your view on those type of things where you can, write a few sentences and apparently you can get your brilliant screenplay?
I think, there's elements, there's different parts of the industry that it might be more useful, but I think at the end of the day, it's always going to be a tool that will help you. An AI can help write a script, but I feel like you need a human at the end to put those finishing touches on it with a script. ChatGPT is crazy when you start using it, and it's mind-blowing. But then after you put 6 things in, the 6th thing they say, they'll tell you a fact that if you look at it, you're like, that's just not true. I don't. Yeah. So you need someone to interpret that footage for you and to be held accountable, because at the end of the day, when you're having all these people on sets or these huge productions where everyone needs to deliver what they said they're going to deliver and be able to communicate effectively, if something's going to take longer, I don't know if AI can do that. And you need someone who is accountable for a department or a delivery of something, who will filter and update. I just think it's going to make stuff more efficient. Maybe departments go from 3 to 2, but it's always a case-by-case basis. And you always need humans to lug barrels of water and there's things that AI just can't do.
Yeah. So do you think maybe the studios are spending extra time looking into AI right now because of what's happening with the writer's strike?
Oh, definitely. I think from their perspective, like I said, if you treated an editor like a robot, you think that a robot could do our job. And I bet you a lot of studio execs kind of think that way. And I also think it's a bargaining chip probably for them, and a way of making things efficiently. But definitely, when you look, there's so many great things on HBO and Netflix, but also when you look at them, some of the suggestions of shows you get look like they were generated by an AI,
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're already using some stuff. There's sometimes when you see a show, you can tell that a show was created out of like so many searched this thing so many times and we didn't have a relevant thing for that. So here's a show that fits that spot. So if something's generated by an AI for an idea, I feel like they already think they could be using all this. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, the product will show. Art is a human thing in nature. So you completely need humans.
But what would you say to the writers at the moment? Because it seems like they may be being starved out to a certain degree. I could be wrong by saying that. It feels like a long time to not be working or knowing when you will be working next. It must be a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And, we mentioned bills earlier, but from as far as I'm aware, in some places like Hollywood, Los Angeles, it can be quite expensive. What type of moves do you think some of those guys should be doing right now?
Man, I feel for them, and I think you're 100% right. I think they're starving them out. And I think we're finally getting to the point where I'm like, what are the next show? For a while, they had the shows backed up, and now I'm like, there's Winning Time on HBO, and I'm like, after that, what are?
Yeah.
So hopefully that they start to feel, the studios start to feel it and feel like they have to have motion. I wish I had I do actually know a couple writers out in LA, and so anecdotally, I know a lot of them are going into writing for different things. Like I have a friend of mine who worked on Superman and Lois, and now he's going into to comics. He's written a couple comics.
Oh, good on him.
So if you're lucky like that, I feel like you might be transitioning into a different kind of writing. I also feel like if you're lucky, there's this, it's only for a few people. It's not for everybody, but there's this, opportunity, which is you've now got all these people who don't have to work these studio jobs, and some person has a passion project, and you have all these unemployed people who are ready to work on a small to medium budget independent feature. And if they can get that waiver, it's like all of these independent films that would never have gotten greenlit are getting an opportunity. And I bet you they're going to come out, and there's going to be some great films that were given this opportunity that people are going to love. And it's going to prove that there is a market for small to medium independent films that is being looked to the side. So my hope is that people could be working on stuff like that. But I don't know, it's kind of grim. Honestly, it's a little bit like a Black Mirror episode. And I mean, speaking about Black Mirror, they had that Black Mirror episode that came out about the AI written show.
Oh, okay.
There's the AI show where they had the person watching. They were able to make their face look, and it was crazy that Netflix released that like a month before the strike started happening. But I mean, it's grim, and hopefully people can find alternatives. And hopefully the studios understand where their bread is buttered. And it's not with robots.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I don't think AI can make puppets, so maybe I'd go back to making. I mean, I've kind of put all my eggs in this basket, and I'm hoping that art is not something it can tackle. I think, like I said, I don't know if there's a choice for me. I've always known I've wanted to work in art in some way, shape, or form. So,
how stressful would you say editing can be? Because sometimes people have found it incredibly stressful. And on your website, I've noticed that you had a 2-week turnaround for a project working for Disney. Can you tell us about that situation and how it came about?
Yeah, I can. I mean, editing can be very stressful, especially when, I've been on set enough to know this. And, you have so many people working so hard on set, 20 to 60 people to get these shots who've put so much of their artistic intent into it. And then at the end of the day, all of this footage comes to you and sits in front of you, and it's just you. It's like one of the writing and editing are like the only processes where for a period of time, I eventually collaborate with people, but it's just me. And if I don't go through all of these shots, I feel a weight that all of these people have worked very hard to get these shots. And if I don't see all of them, I could be throwing their work away. And it's just me in a room. And if I'm not up to the challenge that day, I guess I feel like I have to honor other people's hard work in editing. And that's where a lot of the stress comes from for me. And whether it be the director, the writer, people have put their entire, they want this to be great, and I don't want them to fail them. So that's where a lot of the stress comes for me. I try not to think about that in the moment, but of course it creeps in. But yeah, it was the Disney Insider job, which is on Disney Plus, and it was actually like the second thing 2 weeks into working this job that I had gotten. So I had never lived in St. Louis. I flew out here, and then 2 weeks in, we were working on this. And I guess me not having worked on something of that scale, like a docuseries, was probably good because I didn't know how fast that was. Like, I kind of knew how fast it was, but to me, I was like, I guess this is just how it's done. This is the start of it. But we would have 3 days with the footage before we had to get our first cut to the directors. And these episodes were 22-minute episodes, and they had 3 segments each about. So I would say segments 7 minutes, 6 minutes. So we had 3 days to get a 6 to 7 minute segment to this director. And then we had 2 days with just that director. And then it went to the showrunners. And then we had a week that was involving the showrunner and Disney's notes. But man, it was a sprint. I would get into work like 2 hours early and stay late. And
How
there's
long
that
would it,
adrenaline that just gets you through it, if I'm being honest, you know? And then afterward, you realize you're really stressed.
how long were the days?
I'd say those days were, yeah, if I'm getting in at like 6 a.m. and leaving at 6:37, so it's like
Okay.
12-hour days, which, you know,
Yeah.
were days I was working on set before. So I guess in terms, when those days don't have to be too long, but when you're sprinting and you feel like you need to hit a deadline, then those days become really long because you're not really even taking lunch because you feel like you just need to get through all of this footage. And yeah, you don't want to, there's not a worse feeling than when you get to a director and you show them a cut and they go, where's this, and this? And you go, where's what?
Yeah.
You know? So I would spend the first day and a half just feeling like I've seen all of the footage, that I've really understand it. I understand what we don't have and understand what we have a lot of, and where I can lean into those things. And I kind of try to, I made a select timeline of the interviews, and I really tried to chop it down to the best 30 minutes, and then tried to chop it down to the best 30 minutes-ish of B-roll that I organized in different ways. And then I just take a day and I would just say, don't think of how it's going to be good or bad. Just, it can be 8 minutes, it could be 9 minutes, just edit something out. And that would kind of be Monday to Tuesday morning was me looking at the footage. Tuesday afternoon was me just sprinting to get something, whether it be bad, there. And then I had Wednesday, which was a day of just tweaking, doing the real editing, because man, you can get in that paralysis where you've cut up the selects and you're thinking about how you want it to be, but you're just not putting any pen to paper really.
Okay.
And man, 3 days makes you have none of that. Yeah.
So that experience itself, you go for that situation, you obviously end up giving the final edit to the director or the producer, or however the chain of events went. How happy were they with your work?
That's interesting. So there's 4 of those, but one of them didn't end up airing. But it's tough because a lot of times it's such a condensed time, and these directors were like shooting everything for this little segment. And then by the time we were talking to them, they were shooting the next segment. So a lot of times we didn't have pre-meetings with them about this, which is kind of crazy in retrospect. Yeah. But they would say, I love this, and this, but the vibe is totally off, which is like, in the moment that feels crushing. You know, you're like, oh no, I chose all this music. It's way too majestical, like Disney-like, and they wanted a more naturalistic tone, and it feels overwhelming. So they're still very positive, but you know, even when they list the 5 positive things they liked and the 2 things, it's hard for you not to feel disappointed about how you messed it up. But it's crazy how quick something like vibe and tone, you change the music and you really go through in half a day and just think about what moments will never fit in that tone and what things you can do 1 or 2 subtle tweaks to fit that tone. And it can happen really quick. But I'd say for the most part, all of the notes were, you got the gist of it, but I was thinking this for this moment, or this tone for this moment, and it was kind of fitting into that exact tone. Because since it was 3 segments a show, every director wanted a different tone for if you're doing something with National Geographic than if you're doing a behind the scenes of a Disney ride. So it was finding the tone within the whole show that fits, but also individually making each segment feel different. I'd say the directors usually was just nailing the tone in, but the content was usually pretty close.
In a situation that you were in, do you think in hindsight you can look back or have looked back and said to yourself, well, I can take XYZ from this experience into my next job and it will make it better? And what are X, Y, and Z in that situation?
Yeah, I think in that situation, I realized, like, you know, you have to have the impetus to call a director a minute, if I'm like an hour into the footage, and be like, hey man, just wanted to talk to you about what kind of music you're thinking, or when you were shooting this, were you thinking like it'd be edited in this style? Just give you a couple shows of pacing and tone that they like. And I was in a situation before where I was just going like a mile a minute, and I didn't have I don't know if confidence is the word, but the ownership of the material myself to be like, I'm going to reach out to this director to make time, because they're probably busy. They're not intentionally ignoring you at all. They're on another project on set, and you kind of have to bide for that time. And getting that 5 minutes of clarity at the beginning can save you hours of work later. And not only hours of work, but hours of like creative juice you put into an idea that may not have been the right trail to go down. And you only have so much creative juice a week and ideas to go at. And if you put yourself in the wrong direction, you can be wasting time and energy. And so just really making sure you're on the right page with people. And if you're getting a pain point, communicating that as soonly as possible. So you're not in a situation where you give it, this might have happened to me a little bit, but you're in a situation where, there's a lack of footage in a certain area, and you're only addressing it 3 days in to the edit, how we're going to get around this problem that we have. And so, just trying to hit things early.
Good. Hit things early. Yeah. I can understand that. And lastly, what are you working on next? What can we expect to see from you in the future?
Yeah, well, right now, so I put in I guess it's 2 weeks is the same, but I put in essentially my 2 months at my job at Bruton Strobey, which is a great place to work. They do lots of advertising and documentary and some narrative work, a little bit of everything. And I kind of just want to be freelance and go after narrative editing mainly. So I'm going to be in the next, I don't have anything lined up, which, it's a great time to quit your job and enter narrative filmmaking during a huge writer and actor strike. But there's always reasons not to go for stuff,
Yes, so, I love that. You're right. There's always
you gotta take the jump sometimes.
Yeah. Or it kind of becomes, sorry to interrupt, but it kind of becomes, I'll do it next year, or what I'll do is save up this amount of money, or what I'll do is wait for that opening.
Once this
to
thing
happen.
comes, you just gotta force it sometimes. And just for me, my plan for the next 2 months is I'm trying to like retake myself to film school. I have like a list of 100 films that I haven't seen that I know I need to see, and I'm going to watch all of them over the next 2 months. I've been editing in Premiere for the last couple of years. I know I'm probably going to have to, I've done Avid before. I'm going to have to brush myself up on Avid. So the next 2 months when I don't have a job, I'm just going to be training on Avid, trying to reach out to people in London to talk about the industry there, because I haven't been there for a bit, and just pick their brains about, I've still done narrative stuff, but to transition more from documentary to narrative, because I know that's an interesting and difficult transition. So the next 2 months is me doing all that. And also, like, you saw me talk about puppets. That kind of stuff makes me feel so jazzed. And I feel like I love my job, but when you have a full-time job and you're working on ads and stuff, sometimes your bank of just creative juice gets a little drained up, and I am really excited over the next 2 months to, if I want to make a puppet and make another puppet film if I want to, and make things for myself and reignite a lot of that passion of narrative filmmaking. Because I want to make sure once I'm in London, if I get a job that's 6 months and working hard, that I am good to go and I am not burnt out and I have ideas. I'm prepped on Avid. And, I think taking that time off, I've been working hard for 2.5 years. Taking the time off to refill that bank is really important, because I was in England for a week and a half and I saw so many good plays, and I saw Oppenheimer and Barmy while I was there. And nothing makes you want to make stuff more than after that, it's contagious. So that's what I got planned.
What play did you see?
Man, I saw a lot. I saw There's one called Dr. Semmelweis with Mark Rylance. And Mark Rylance is such a great actor. And it's a play about the doctor who discovered like having to sanitize equipment because it could make people sick. But he was such a poor communicator and so brash that no one believed him. And so he discovered it 20 years before anyone else. It could have solved all these lives, but he wasn't a good communicator and he wasn't able to convince people of it, which was a great play. I saw a bunch of, they're all going through I saw Book of Mormon, which is hilarious. And I think there's 222, which is a horror play in London, which was also great. And man, it just I haven't seen theater so much since, COVID. And it just reminded me when I was there, when you see a great production like that, a great artist, it's just contagious. Surrounding yourself with those people.
Yes.
Even if it's not the same industry as you, just people who are just going for it and constantly consuming that art. I believe that it just comes out in your work. You get inspired more and all that. And so I can't wait to be in London and go to museums every day.
If you liked this podcast, share it with friends. Leave a comment in the comment section and hit the subscribe button. Have you thought of upgrading your cinematography game? Would you like to have an ASC cinematographer mentor you for free? Join veteran cinematographer Suki Medenzovic, ASC, Disney, Pixar, FX Networks, Netflix, American Horror Story. As he teaches you how to create beautiful images using 3 lighting techniques he has mastered on film sets over his 30-plus years in the film industry. Each technique uses basic, low-cost lighting equipment so that anyone can achieve beautiful visuals no matter your project's budget. If you want to take your cinematography to the next level, visit filmmakingconversations.com to sign up for instant access.